There is more trouble in the air for Conservative leader Andrew Scheer. Today, he announced his shadow cabinet, and there was a notable absence from the list. A veteran Conservative, Ed Fast, speaking to CBC News, Fast says he was offered a job on Scheer's front bench, but he had to turn it down. Hannah Thibodeau spoke with a Conservative MP. She joins us now. Hi, Hannah.
Hi.
So what did Mr. Fast have to say about why he did that?
Yeah, the big thing about this, Vashi, is this is the first MP within Scheer's caucus to come out and cite concerns with his leadership. So yes, I did speak with him a little bit earlier, and here's what he had to say about why, when he was offered a profile, but he wouldn't tell me which one it was, what he had to say about it. Take a listen.
We discussed where I could fit into his shadow cabinet, and I expressed my desire not to be included at this time. So Mr. Scheer, I believe, is entitled to surround himself with a team that fully supports his leadership, and I'm looking forward to remaining fully engaged in the affairs of our Conservative caucus and to holding Justin Trudeau to account for his actions, his words, and how he leads this country.
So he said no because he felt that Scheer needed people surrounding him that supported his leadership. Ed Fast is a very prominent, long-standing Conservative. He's been an MP for 13 years. He was also the Trade Minister under Stephen Harper, and he was a critic in the last Parliament, the environment critic under Andrew Scheer. So interesting about that. I asked him why he decided to do this. Here's how he explained it.
It's very clear that voters were unhappy with Justin Trudeau, but we were never able to close the deal with Canadians either. So Justin Trudeau has been reduced to a minority government. We did not win an election that we should have won. I have shared with John Baird my concerns about how the last election was run. John has met with many other stakeholders as well, and I'm going to await the outcome of that process.
So, Vashi, we did hear from Mr. Scheer's office on these comments from Mr. Fast. Mr. Scheer says he appreciates the efforts of Mr. Fast in creating the Conservative environmental plan for the election campaign, and he'll continue in the Conservative caucus in different ways. But there are also some other MPs who are coming out to defend Mr. Scheer, which really we've been hearing a lot more from the other side of trying to push him out and push him out fast, get him to resign before this April delegated convention. One of those people today on Facebook, Tom Lakuski, he put this up. He said, shame on those who are acting this way. He says that these are driven by a small cabal of backroom boys, many of them former supporters of Maxime Bernier. And of course, Maxime Bernier was in the last leadership race. He lost to Andrew Scheer. So there are some people coming out to defend Andrew Scheer when it comes to all of these attacks on his leadership.
But it's hard to understate or overstate the significance of an MP,
absolutely.
A sitting MP, saying what he did today to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things you did hear him mention there is that he gave all the reasons why to John Baird. And John Baird, former cabinet minister, he's doing the external review, the postmortem on the campaign. One of the things about this, our sources and multiple sources are saying, is that really he's had to hear everything he needs to hear. The message is consistent. He's still going to continue on with his postmortem on this. But what they're saying is that essentially the election was a mess, which we have heard, and it's Mr. Scheer's leadership which is partly to blame. So that review will be taken back to the leader before Christmas.
It will be telling. Thank you, Hannah.
Quite welcome.
CBC's Hannah Thibodeau. Although Ed Fast, as Hannah reported, rejected Andrew Scheer's invitation to the Conservative shadow cabinet, 50 other MPs accepted. Aaron O'Toole is one of them. And Aaron O'Toole joins us now from Toronto. He's the Conservatives' foreign affairs critic with new responsibilities for the Greater Toronto area. Hi, Mr. O'Toole. Nice to see you. Thanks for making time for us.
It's good to be with you.
You're returning to the portfolio of foreign affairs critic. I wanted to touch on one subject before I get into a whole host of other issues, but particularly we're about to talk to Jesus Seade, who is Mexico's chief NAFTA negotiator. He's here in Ottawa. We know there have been developments over the week. Your party has in the past been critical of the agreement that the government arrived at the end with the United States and Mexico. Will you be supporting ratification?
We've tried to say we'd like to support ratification and said when the U.S. removed tariffs on steel and aluminum for Canada, we actually forged an agreement in the U.S. that if they removed the tariffs, we would try and work with the government to support the deal. Depending on what has changed, Vashi, we'll work at that. But we've tried to work on a bipartisan basis because the U.S. trade relationship is so important.
And on the other additional measures that might be added to the deal, we know that they, in sort of broad terms, relate to stronger enforcement of labor standards in Mexico. In theory, without knowing the details, I understand, but in theory, is that something your party supports?
In theory, yeah. We've seen the very, very low wage rates in Mexico lead to an imbalance in a relationship. We also have heard that there might be reopening of the biologics and the pharmaceutical end. So there's a bunch of question marks. So we're not going to prejudge, but we're going to critique, which is our job, but also try and work with the government where we can.
I mentioned off the top there you'll be assuming new responsibilities for the GTA. What exactly does that mean?
Well, we need more Conservative MPs in the GTA, Vashi. That's a simple math with it. I'm proud to be the MP for Durham, which is in the eastern part of the GTA, but we lost some good members, of course, Lisa Raitt, and we have to learn the lessons from that. So I like that Andrew's given me this mandate. I worked in Toronto in the legal and business circles, did a lot of charitable work here, so I'm going to be spending more time across the GTA, working with great candidates we have, connecting with chambers of commerce, listening. There's still a lot of people very frustrated with the Trudeau government, but we also have to recognize we lost the election and people sent us a message too. So there's a lot of listening that has to happen, and the Liberals are listening a lot in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Ms. Freeland says listening hard. Well, I'm going to be listening hard in the GTA.
What have you heard so far about why your party was not as successful as you would have liked it to be, particularly in the GTA?
I think, you know, the troubles Mr. Trudeau had kind of dominated the middle part of the campaign, and the early part was introducing Andrew Scheer to more and more Canadians. Then it became the sort of the Mr. Trudeau's videos of the past, and that dominated things. And we never then did reconnect. So I think not enough people knew our team. We didn't get our leader out enough. People had some concerns. We didn't support some candidates. So we've got a lot of learning both on the ground and as MPs and myself. What could I have done better? So this is listening to our grassroots, but also we want to grow our tent in the GTA, and that's going to be something I work on.
I want to ask you about the leadership of the leader of your party, Mr. Scheer, because I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of the stories this week, a lot of the people who have gone on the record criticizing or questioning that leadership. Today, my colleague Hannah Thibodeau spoke to your colleague, Ed Fast, who said that, unlike you, he rejected Mr. Scheer's offer of a post in the shadow cabinet, he said, because Mr. Scheer is entitled to surround himself with a team that fully supports his leadership. I know you've worked with Mr. Fast for a long time. What does that say to you?
Well, Ed Fast was one of my political mentors. My first position was parliamentary secretary when he did all our trade work, and I respect him a great deal. I think that Justin Trudeau's mismanagement of Canada's relationships around the world is one of his biggest failures as Prime Minister. You know, I've been very critical, Vashi, of the India trip, the situation in China, tariffs with a number of countries around the world, and even the U.S. relationship. So I'm going to continue to do that because we're here to hold Mr. Trudeau to account. Andrew's reaching out and hearing concerns from people that lost, people that are in the caucus. That's part of what a leader does after an election. Certainly we're all disappointed. Andrew is, I am. It's what you do with that disappointment. And so I don't question what other people do. I just can talk about what I'm going to do, which is help hold Trudeau to account and make sure Minister Champagne works on repairing a number of frayed relationships around the world. And their UN vote last week, flip-flopping a position 4 years worth in rejecting anti-Israel motions at the UN is disturbing when they flip their position on that. So that's what I'm going to do when Parliament resumes.
Do you support Mr. Scheer's leadership of your party, though?
Absolutely, I do. We have a leader. The leader is out there taking a lot of hard knocks, listening to people in the party, outside of the party. That's what you do. There were some highlights. We have more MPs. We have a number of amazing new MPs. I got to know some of them in the campaign. We won the popular vote, but certainly we're disappointed with the result. No question, Vashi. Andrew Scheer's disappointed with the result, and he's trying to listen to people, and clearly some people are very vocally upset, and I think the leader will try and address some of those concerns.
Do you think that he is the right person to beat Mr. Trudeau in the next election?
I think we have to give Andrew Scheer the opportunity to show that he is.
Look, do you think that he is?
I think he can show people. Yes, I think he's got the qualities, but it really will take him taking the lead. What is great about the Conservative Party is we're all passionate to defeat Justin Trudeau, but we have to realize we didn't. We just came through a campaign. Our parliament hasn't even sat yet, Vashi. So some people that are lighting their hair on fire, we've had one meeting at as a caucus. We haven't even had a throne speech yet. We have serious national unity issues. I think we have to give the leader an opportunity to say what he's learned from the campaign, say what he's going to do differently, indicate some changes. And I'm here to hold Mr. Trudeau to account as a representative for my riding on the foreign stage. I'm going to do that. And I think Andrew will reach out and make the case. And it's really our party members that decide, not one or two people. Our party will decide in April.
Mr. Scheer, you ran against Mr. Scheer in the leadership back in 2017. Would you ever consider running for leader again?
I think Andrew will connect with people in the next few months and give them his vision for learning the lessons and rebuilding. Am I disappointed with what's happened in the GTA? Absolutely. I think we could have won the election, and so Andrew's given me this extra duty to look and work in the GTA. I'm going to take that. I spoke to him 2 days ago. He's out listening and trying to learn from the loss. So that's my job, is to work with our team and what I'm going to focus on. I did run in the last leadership. I'm a very proud Conservative. I'm a proud Conservative from Southern Ontario, but I'm also a proud member of a team.
With respect, that didn't exactly answer the question about whether or not you'd run again. Have you ruled it out until April?
The role I have now, Vashi, is to support the leader. I'm a military guy by nature. You know, I was in the military, and I support the general. I'm on the battlefield with him. It's easy for some voices out there to let their frustrations become public. That's their right, but this is really a grassroots party that will decide whether Mr. Scheer wins their trust back. I'm going to help him as much as I can as a member of his caucus, as a proud Conservative MP, and I think he's going to take the time to listen, take some of the flack. That's what a leader has to do, and then it's really going to be up to our party to determine, you know, whether he has the support to go forward, and I'm going to try and help as much as I can.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Nice to have you back on the show. Appreciate your time.
Good to be back.
Aaron O'Toole, as you heard there, is backing Conservative Party leader Andrew Scheer despite a rough week of questions about his leadership. Meanwhile, Conservative MP and former Trade Minister Ed Fast says no thanks to a shadow cabinet role. What does it say about Andrew Scheer's leadership? Time for the Power Panel. In Toronto, journalist and host of the Safe Space podcast, Vicky Machama. Marty Patriquin of The Logic joins us from Montreal. And next to me here in studio, senior writer for Maclean's, Paul Wells, and the CBC's very own Aaron Wary. Hi, everybody.
Hi there.
Nice to see you. So you've got two contrasting takes from MPs here, Vicky. First, Aaron O'Toole, who sounds very, and those clips were in response to me asking him if he's considering a run at becoming leader. Clearly he said no, but they're at this point at least. But then that's in contrast to Ed Fast, who says, I'm not going to be part of shadow cabinet because Mr. Scheer should be surrounded by people who support him. How do you read that?
I mean, I read that as the general fallout of the election, which is that the various factions within the Conservative Party that were very successfully contained by Stephen Harper seem to be spilling out. And there seems to be the professional staff, which are the strategists and party professionals. And then there's the MPs themselves, people who've been in the party, so very different stances. But the caucus itself, aside from Ed Fast, has not been as vocal as some of the party professionals or ex-Harperites. And so I take that, Aaron O'Toole's stance as being, one of operating with the fact that they haven't actually gotten to function in opposition just yet, and he's waiting out to see what happens. I also do note that some of the profiles that he might have gotten as critic, he wasn't assigned. So he may just be waiting it out.
What do you think, Paul? What's going on here?
So today I tried typing "who can replace" in a Google search window, and it auto-completes to "who can replace Andrew Scheer."
Your Google, though, probably.
Well,
not everyone's.
That's right.
I might have had something to do with that.
The thing is, so that's an indication that a lot of people are asking that question. Yeah. It's also interesting. It also happens to be the toughest question to answer. Look, say we get rid of Andrew Scheer, then what? Peter MacKay was not a dynamite progressive Conservative leader 13 years ago. Rona Ambrose really doesn't want to come back. But I think it is telling, though, that Ed Fast has now public problems with Andrew Scheer as leader. Ed Fast is a social conservative, like Andrew Scheer is reputed to be. He's from the West, where Andrew Scheer is reported to have stronger support. Ed Fast, to my memory, has never criticized any conservative leader publicly. And so that suggests that the rot is maybe deeper than just a few Toronto consultants. Although I got to say, the Toronto consultants are having a heyday this week. It may not just be them.
Aaron?
Yeah, I think Ed Fast's statement today is significant, A, because it's the first MP to come out and say something, and B, because it is not obvious that Ed Fast would have a huge problem with what happened in this campaign. You know, Ed Fast is a social conservative. Ed Fast had a fairly significant role in writing the climate change platform. So the two big issues that have been sort of generally cited for why the Conservatives didn't do so well or why Andrew Scheer needs to change, Ed Fast is sort of implicated in both of those. So it's not, if you were listing, ranking people who were going to jump out and say they didn't want to be on Andrew Scheer's side anymore, Ed Fast was not at the top of that list. The other part of this, the other thing that I think is interesting about this is that I think the MPs, from the outside, it seems like the MPs don't want to get any blood on their hands at this point, and they're more than happy to let the sort of professional politicos sort of take the heat on this one. And they're all coming back to the House next week. They're all going to be asked, where do you stand on Andrew Scheer? Mm-hmm. And they're all going to be searching around for answers. And I don't know how sustainable the sort of what we saw from Aaron O'Toole today, which is he's the leader, so...
Yeah, I'm a soldier. Do you support your leader? I'm a soldier.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's not many
I'm
soldiers.
duty-bound to support him. I don't know how long that can last.
I mean, that's a really good point, and it's one that I think somebody made on the Power Panel a couple days ago when Chris Workington was coming out and saying, you know, Andrew Scheer is really listening to everybody who's basically, I'm paraphrasing, but dumping on his leadership. Right? He's on this listening tour, and he really listens to people. I think it was Kathleen Petty pointed out, and Marty, I wonder what you think. Yeah. Like, that isn't exactly a ringing endorsement of Mr. Scheer and his leadership. So even the people who are saying we are supportive, we're not going to, stab him in the back, they're not coming out and saying, like, this is the guy who will beat Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, well, that's it exactly. And to Paul's point, you're right. Like, there's not anybody that's gonna that necessarily is who's gonna replace him. That heir apparent. But I think the strategy in this is basically to stanch the bleeding. It's better to cut him off now than in April when we lose all those crucial months in the upcoming Parliament. So get him out now, and then I'm sure that leadership void will fill somehow. I think what we're sort of witnessing a little bit is almost like an outgrowth of what we saw during the election, and more profoundly, what kind of leader and politician Andrew Scheer is in the first place. He is a guy, he was trying to be everything to everyone and ended up pleasing no one. We talked about Ed Fast in there and the social conservatives. Social conservatives are probably the country's biggest useful idiots when it comes to political support. Stephen Harper threw them. I'll run out of fingers.
What do you mean by that before we get in major trouble on Twitter? What exactly does that mean?
What it means is that I was just explaining. Stephen Harper, throws social conservatives under the bus. I run out of fingers the number of times he did it during his tenure. They stuck hard and fast with him because they believed he was this man. So they will literally, you throw them a bone and they will literally line up behind you. They can't even stand Andrew Scheer anymore. That is the extent to what Paul called rot in there, and rot is a very good example. A very good word to use in that situation. Even social conservatives want him to take a hike, and to even worse. The other side of that equation. Normally, if the social conservatives don't like you, then the sort of the mainstream wing of the Conservative Party would be like, okay, great, we'll possibly get elected in the 905 next time around. They don't even want him. He's stuck in the middle in the worst possible type of way.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second, Vicky. Isn't that an issue that past Conservative leaders have faced as well? Like, if you're trying to make a big tent, keep the various factions together, it's going to be hard to please everybody.
Yes, but I think the question of whether you can have a big tent really works for our Canadian Conservative politics. Canadian Conservative politics has always tended, not always, regularly tends towards more of a strong man in a big tent, holding on and corralling these forces. And I think Stephen Harper is the classic example of how this works, which is there was theoretically a big tent, but nobody but Stephen Harper spoke outside of the big tent. And so I think it's that challenge and figuring out what to do next for Andrew Scheer. the problem is that he's facing a very different landscape than Stephen Harper had. I mean, Vashi, you just asked a question about, Marty Patrick to elaborate on something before Twitter yelled at him, and I think that's a very different landscape, and that's the environment that Andrew Scheer is also
literally hear
dealing
happening right now, by the way.
And so I think it's important to note then that also social conservatives have access to Twitter. The mainstream Conservative Party has access to Twitter. Young conservatives see what's happening on social media, and they want a much different and a more engaged party. And Andrew Scheer is standing in the middle of that, attempting to figure out how to corral all these forces. That's a very different landscape than Stephen Harper had.
Do you think he survives, Paul, till April?
It's harder and harder to see how that happens. Now, the thing is, we've written premature autopsies before, right? A year ago, we were all
We like
here,
to do that in the media. Yeah.
Jagmeet Singh, how can he possibly hang on? Turns out he could quite well.
Sort of.
A parliamentary setting, which is less than a week away, where caucus discipline holds, where you've either got to kind of applaud the leader when he stands up to nail the prime minister, or look kind of lost, might be a more congenial circumstance for Andrew Scheer. It's honestly, it's a bit of a stretch to imagine him hanging on till next week, but I think we may be working ourselves into a bit of a froth here.
Do you think he sticks around till April?
My hunch would be that it would become clear one way or the other well long before April whether this is the end. I do think, to Paul's point, I don't think the Liberals intended it this way, but by stretching out the cabinet appointment and then the throne speech, they left a vacuum, especially with Justin Trudeau, as we were talking about off air, no longer doing photo ops. There's this vacuum, and it's now been filled by speculation about Andrew Scheer, and he has had no forward momentum. He has no chance to show anything other than Leona Alislav and answer a bunch of questions about his own leadership. And so it's possible that once the House comes back and the attention turns back to the government and Andrew Scheer gets to stand up and yell at Justin Trudeau, that changes things a bit. But then you've got another several months until April, and I'm at this moment, given the momentum of the last 3 days, it seems hard to imagine one way or another this gets to April.
Marty, quick final word?
And I think some of the reason that people want to out of here so quickly is because I think there's a realization on the part of a lot of people, a lot of politicians, in opposition of that truism, is that you're never going to get a weaker Justin Trudeau than you are now, because he's in that minority position. So now's the time to take advantage of it. I think exactly what Aaron just said. His future, Mr. Scheer's future, will depend entirely if he can take advantage of that.